First, having read the Book of Myths and loaded the camera and checked the edge of the knife blade, I put on the body armor of black rubber, the absurd flippers, the grave and awkward mask. I am having to do this not like Cousteau with his assiduous team aboard the sun-flooded schooner, but here alone. There is a ladder. The ladder is always there, hanging innocently close to the side of the schooner. We know what it is for, we who have used it. Otherwise, it is a piece of maritime floss, some sundry equipment. I go down. Rung after rung and still, the oxygen immerses me. The blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down. My flippers cripple me. I crawl like an insect down the ladder, and there is no one to tell me when the ocean will begin. First, the air is blue, and then it is bluer, and then green, and then black, and I am blacking out, and yet my mask is powerful. It pumps my blood with power. The sea is another story. The sea is not a question of power. I have to learn alone to turn my body without force in the deep element. And now, it is easy to forget what I came for, among so many who have always lived here, swaying their crenellated fans between the reefs, and besides, you breathe differently down here. I came to explore the wreck. The words are purposes. The words are maps. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. I stroked the beam of my lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or weed. The thing I came for, the wreck and not the story of the wreck, the thing itself and not the myth, the drowned face always staring toward the sun, the evidence of damage worn by salt and swaying to this threadbare beauty, the ribs of the disaster, curving their assertion among the tentative haunters. This is the place, and I am here, the mermaid whose dark hair streams black, the merman in his armored body. We circle silently about the wreck. We dive into the hold. I am she. I am he whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes, whose breasts still bear the stress, whose silver, copper, vermeil cargo lies obscurely inside the barrels, half wedged and left to rot. We are the half-destroyed instruments that once held to a course the water-eaten log, the fouled compass. We are, I am, you are, by cowardice or courage, the one who find our way back to the scene, carrying a knife, a camera, a book of myths in which our names do not appear.
So this is the analysis portion of Diving into the Wreck. Firstly, what does the poem say? So the speaker is kind of ambiguous, but we know that they are an unnamed explorer, and she's also alone in her search. We can later assume that she's a woman. She addresses the reader to whom or what the poem is about. She addresses the reader. She says in the last stanza, the first line, she says, "We are, I am, you are." And that kind of ties the reader in with the narrator and shows that they have the same mindset, they have the same goals, and the reader can do what the speaker has done. The situation of the poem is that there is an explorer who's diving alone to examine a shipwreck in the ocean. The progression in the beginning, she prepares for her journey, then she climbs on a ladder, and there's a transition into the ocean from the surface, and then the wreck is explored along with things around it. The meaning behind the actual situation can be interpreted in different ways, so it can be seen generally as encountering the unknown, or even exploring your own personal identity, or in society, or more prominently, the feminist movement of the time and the relationship between men and women. So how does the poem say these things? It has a lot of imagery, mainly through the ocean, which can be seen as deep and dark and uncertain, especially because she was exploring it alone. Yet it does contain a lot of creatures. She describes mermaids in the ocean, and it also holds situations that are vital to her experience that she kind of wants to see on her own, not from the Book of Myths. So the Book of Myths, it kind of establishes this ideas of the wreck that she's heard before. It's like an unwritten code. Relating to the feminist movement, it would be like societal rules, things like that. And of course, myths, they might not always be true, but a lot of times they will hold morals. Mythology will hold morals, so it's something that can be learned from. There's also the absurd flippers, which she describes in the first stanza. There's absurd flippers and an awkward mask, and this can be a symbol of the speaker putting herself through discomfort in order to discover new things, to explore things about herself, or to explore the past of the feminist movement. that she's trying to work with. We also have a lot of imagery about the damage and the treasures around the ship. In the 8th stanza, she describes barrels half wedged and left to rot. And while they are half wedged, they're kind of destroyed. There are things that might be a lot of the past of the feminist movement left. They're still like half destroyed, things that can be learned from, things that could be used later on that she's finding. She also sees words, and she describes the words. The words are purposes and the words are maps in the 6th stanza. And this kind of represents that maps can only tell people so much. So this is why she has to explore it on her own instead of learning from the Book of Myths, and also so that she can be heard, her individual voice, especially relating to the feminist movement of the time. And then there's also a lot of figurative language and poetic devices used along with imagery. There's, of course, an inverse relationship between truth and false reality, which can usually be found in lightness and darkness. So, a lot of the times, light is associated with the truth and darkness is lies. But in the case of this poem, Rich actually uses the surface, which has air and brightness, to show lies and myths, while diving down into this deep dark ocean, as in the 4th stanza where she says, first the air is blue and then it is bluer and green and black and I am blacking out. That point, the darkness is actually what's showing her the truth. There's also many allusions. So she talks about Cousteau's dives in the 1st stanza, who was a famous diver who had a large team, and of course she is different than Cousteau because she is alone in this dive, showing that she needs to take it on her own. There's also in the 6th stanza where she says, the evidence of damage worn by salt, the ribs of disaster. So this can also kind of be seen as a biblical reference, as Eve was created from Adam's ribs, which shows a connection between men and women, which is vital to the feminist movement at the time, showing that they are equal and that they can actually help each other in this movement, which was kind of a stigma at the time, where men couldn't really be in the feminist movement. There's also in the 7th stanza where she says, I am she, I am he, just showing another connection between men and women and blurring the lines between the two, adding a sort of ambiguity. There's also a lot of enjambment in the poem, and so this poem does flow a lot. It has very few short sentences. It'll have a lot of short lines, but very few short sentences, and that just kind of helps the poem almost flow like the diver down into the wreck, into the ocean, and can be associated with like waves. There's waves of lines in enjambment as well, and of course there's waves in a feminist movement. There's also the attitude of the speaker, which can be seen as very meticulous throughout the entire piece. And we can see that through her observing the objects, recording things, and just overall wanting to explore the wreck to determine the truth. By the end, she still has the same attitude, but it is stronger, and she ties the reader into that attitude as well, kind of like a call to action. The mood's very hopeful by the end, where she kind of is searching for this new era, learning from the past, because that can't be all that guides her. She has to kind of pave her own way, and showing that unity is at the center of it. There's also other implications and symbolizations, of course, the feminist movement of the time, and just kind of exploring the unknown, having to kind of conquer your fears. So along with enjambment, we also see her kind of stopping herself almost in the beginning from getting swept away by this deep dark ocean and the shipwreck, where in the 2nd and 3rd stanzas, she has sentences almost every 2nd or 3rd line instead of just one very long run-on sentence. And so this is her kind of saying, maybe I should stop myself. But then once she gets down, once she kind of conquers that fear, she's swept away and she's taken through this flow, as I described before. Then what does the poem say to me? Of course, this has real-life relations to the current feminist movement, which also comes in waves. Of course, it's evolved in a way which she has tried to say throughout the poem. as trying to see these myths and see the wreck for herself and then learn from that. Have I ever felt this way? Of course. There have been times in my life where I've experienced misogyny, and of course, we live in a very patriarchal society. So, reading this definitely relates to my life, and this also just kind of adds to my knowledge and awareness, of course, of the movement and of the importance of an individual voice and unity in that movement as well.